You know what's cool about this week? This was the last week of the whatchamacallit, the last reading plan bookmark.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we got new bookmarks.
Yeah, although it is weird that there's one day that's kind of like technically for the next
Right.
one on it, but
It's good.
it's kind of fun. Feels like
yeah.
another one, like all of them. You know, we're making our way through.
Yeah,
We really are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting
I mean,
nervous
that's why
about
whenever
the
we were talking
end
about
a little bit. but-
Revelation, we're like, oh, we got Revelation
Yeah.
pretty soon here.
What are you getting nervous about?
I don't know. Revelation, when we went through it as a church, it was just, it's kind of like, I don't know. There's just a lot to it. But although I feel like Hebrews is a little bit similar after we are getting through it. There's just so much there that's like, I feel like, I mean, it's just not explicit reading. It's not a narrative, like telling a story. It's, this is like talking clearly to a specific group of people who have like this either struggle or the wrong
Framework
perception.
or-
Yeah, this
yeah.
weird framework that I don't have. So it's like, everything means something. And
Yep.
unless I'm reading in the cheat notes, and even then, I'm sure I'm just barely scratching the surface, just like Rachel was able to do last week. But before we start, can we just briefly get through that question that was asked that we missed that we didn't get to talk about last
Oh,
week?
yeah. I
was
don't
that
have it in
question?
front of me now.
Well, it was
Yes.
basically a question. It was back in Matthew.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
let's
about
flip
the
there.
10
Yes, thank
virgins.
you.
10 virgins, yeah, with the oil. And really that, I guess we should get there first. I should have been more prepared for that.
Got it.
But I don't remember where it is. It's at the back of Matthew.
Matthew 25.
25. See? I knew it was a big number. It goes to 28, so it's towards the end. The question, I don't really know because I never read it. You read it. Can you just quick paraphrase what the gist
yeah,
of it was?
the question is really like why the virgins who were prepared, why didn't they just share what they had with the other people who weren't prepared?
Yeah.
That's really the gist of the question.
Because the illustration is like ultimately like, hey, he's giving two examples of being prepared, and because you never know when the day is going to come, and if there's these two sets of people who are believing, one that's like they're prepared, they're ready, and ones that aren't, why aren't the prepared people living in a way where they're sharing with others?
I'll just read 10 to the 12. So they're not ready, they're not prepared. And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he said, truly, I say to you, I do not know you. Watch, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. That's how it ends.
Yeah.
And so the question was, okay, well, like, why weren't the other women prepared to share, to let these other women in?
Yeah.
Good question. I just don't
That's a
think
great
that's
question.
the point of the parable. I think the point of the parable, again, this is probably a fictional story Jesus is using to illustrate the difference between those who are ready for his coming and those who are not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the simplest answer. And I think that it's good to ask that question because, we cannot also learn even from that question. Okay, well, if we're worried about the people who aren't invited in, we don't want anyone to hear the words, I don't know you, from
Yeah.
Jesus. We don't want that. And so to mourn about that and wonder what we can do about that is a really good question. And so the answer is, now we have to share, right? We share
Yeah.
the gospel, we share the hope of Jesus. That's how we do sort of what this question is asking. But at some point, it is too late, right? We all do have to make a choice. We have to make a decision. We see that over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I mean that maybe I wasn't exactly listening to what you just said, so I apologize.
Nobody was, which is probably okay.
They definitely were. But where it says, he answered, truly, truly, I say to you, I do not know you. And again, I think it's the idea of like ultimately, it's clear who he knows and who he doesn't know, and like about being ready. I think if you're worried about that, well, if you're in or out, I mean, there's assurance of salvation, some different things,
Yeah.
but there will be people who he doesn't know who the door is shut to, right?
Yep.
So,
right.
And
Say-
if you're burdened
right.
by those people, who else will tell them
Yeah.
but you?
Yeah. So,
You can't share after,
yeah.
right? You share now.
Yes.
That's whenever you share who Jesus is and invite
Yes.
them into relationship with him.
So hopefully that covers that.
Okay. Hey, and before we jump into Hebrews, I thought you were bringing us all a Red Bull this morning.
I don't drink
That's
Red
what-
Bull.
I got
You don't
no,
drink-
I got no,
I've
response.
I've
to that.
never,
I
I've
actually
never
would have.
drinking a Red Bull ever.
I don't. Those texts were coming through crazy yesterday, and we like moved the times early this morning, and I was like, all right, well, we're having Red Bull.
Oh man, next time.
When,
No,
when,
it's all
when,
good.
when someone told me they tasted like Smarties, I was like, I could probably eat a Smartie, but I don't think
Or
I
drink a
could
can
want
of
to
it?
drink something that tastes like that. So
I
I've
think
always
that's
just
a
been
generous.
like, yeah.
I don't know if that's actually.
And I'm pretty adventurous, but I'm just not that adventurous.
What's happening now?
All right, Hebrews chapter 5 is where it picks back up.
Really, 4:14,
Where we pick up. Okay, 4:14.
where it starts with Jesus, the great high priest. It's a weird place to break the chapter.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't say that on my bookmark. It said Hebrews 5 is where we were starting, not Hebrews 4:14.
Well.
I'm just kidding. Okay, so
Jesus, the great high priest.
yeah, but I think we already kind of talked about. I mean, it's been saying that already
Yeah.
multiple times.
No, I think that's really helpful that you just
In
my
Hebrews.
I know, but my favorite thing is when you say like we've said that, we've done that.
Yeah.
Because we have it's a very consistent message throughout the whole Bible, throughout the New Testament, and we're getting to where we've read most of the New Testament now, and so you're like, oh, we've done this, we've talked about it because it's really consistent. It's the same story over and over.
Yeah, but and even in Hebrews, I mean, he's been laying this case. He's been like establishing, through Moses and all these comparisons as like he's the great high priest, the better version.
Yep.
What is the words that we say?
The true and better.
True and better. Yeah, the true and better Moses.
Yep.
So, okay, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I have some stuff in the tail end of 5 here. And
What do you have?
Well, just I think 7 through 10 was, this idea that although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designed by God, a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. I don't know how I say it.
Yeah, you did it.
So, which ends up we talk about a lot later on in the rest of this, setting that up. But just this idea of it got me wondering, like, although he was a son, like the implications of what a son would typically do, like maybe not obey or like fall short. But although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, like his, the path ultimately to what he accomplished on the cross, all those opportunities leading up to that of like overcoming, or you say overcoming,
Yeah.
like he had a choice, but
It was, I mean, I think he's referencing the Garden of
Yeah.
Gethsemane
Yeah.
here. He said he cried out to the one who could save him from death. And I mean, we've talked about that a few times in the Gospels. I mean, that was real and painful, and that is the epitome of suffering. We don't think about that part of the suffering of Jesus as much as we think about the cross sometimes, but that moment of fear and suffering and pain that then led to the obedience of the cross is what he's referencing. And I loved this chapter because just to remember that that really suffering can lead us to trust and obedience that can change everything for us and for other people too. And that's what he's referencing.
Yeah, and I think initially, again, it's a little bit of growth, getting hung up on some of the wording here. And again, I know it's not the exact translation, and being made perfect, he was like, wait, he had to be made perfect
Made
because
whole.
made whole. That, but it's
that same
probably
word.
like the completion
Yes.
of his life.
Yeah,
it's a
completeness.
completion. Yeah, the completeness of.
It's that same
stuff.
word that we
Yeah.
talked about in Matthew.
Yeah. So then, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the Melchizedek because we'll do it later on, but it definitely, that has a lot of implications, which we're later going to read about, of what that means, which these people probably knew and understood.
I mean, I think we can go there if that.
Well, I don't know if
reading
there's
this as
other
a
stuff.
section, unless you need to.
Well, no, I mean, I think in 6, there's some definite, before we get there, maybe worth talking about 6, because I think a similar thing that we were just talking about with the virgins, like people could get hung up in some of these words here and what this means.
Which ones?
Well, just like that, Okay, he starts talking about this milk. You don't need milk like the easy stuff. You need
Oh,
to
yeah.
start working towards like solid food. And they said like, okay, we should be leaving the elementary doctrine of Christ, go on to maturity. Like stop focusing on this lower stuff, like laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works of faith. Which I'm like thinking like that's a pretty big thing. We should still be like
It's foundational.
yeah, the instructions about washings, laying. So it's all these like these kind of like rules, things that maybe they're hung up on. But then it like shifts again and says, so it's like get to meatier stuff, but then also, hey, about people who may have like not really believed or like walked away or like, can you not?
This is the section where you sort of understand the occasion of this letter sermon. This is why he's writing it, because he's encouraging them and he's reminding them of all that Jesus says, but he's also warning them, hey guys, like, we've talked about these foundational aspects of your faith over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's time to move to maturity.
Yeah, so because then it says, and this we will do if God permits, for it is impossible in the case of those who have been enlightened, who have tasted the heavenly gift and have shared in the Holy Spirit and have tasted the goodness of the Word of God and the powers of the age to come, and then have fallen away, to restore them again to repentance, since they're crucifying once again the Son of God to their own harm and holding him up to whatever there was the last
Contempt.
word, I think. Yeah, contentment. So he's like, it's impossible for that to happen. And I'm like, wait a second. Impossible feels like a strong word in our language. I'm not too sure what the original word here is, but it's like, dude, if someone starts, if someone falls away, it's impossible for them to come back. But then I know that gets into some weird things about salvation and perseverance of the saints and some other things at play. So I just think these were words that I could see, man, this could junk people up. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I didn't get any answers. You both just looked at each other like, you go.
I'm already talking too much. Lance is talking.
I'm ready to talk about Melchizedek.
All right, so we can get past
no,
that.
it's fine. But I don't want to blow past this.
Right.
So,
I mean,
I think that we've seen this warning in a lot of letters in the New Testament already. It is, I think we sometimes think of it as this intellectual assent faith, and it's not. That's not how the Bible talks about faith. It really is allegiance to Jesus. It is this faith in following Jesus. And if you turn away from him and you walk away and you're unrepentant, which means you don't think you need forgiveness, you don't think you need Jesus. No. I mean, that is you just rejecting who Jesus is. And you can't return from that. I mean, that's really even what we were talking about with the parable of the virgins. I don't think that means we're human beings and it's grace upon grace, which we also see. So we can have days that are bad or times that are hard where we're struggling. And we also see that he's sympathetic. He knows that. But it is still an allegiance to Jesus throughout it. And that's what saves us.
Yeah.
Is abiding in him.
And ultimately, I guess where I kind of made it up in my head, so this is some of TED theology. This isn't take this very open-handedly and probably heretical.
It's the best. I hope you write a book at the end of this.
Yeah, but it basically is saying here, okay, those who have been enlightened, so they've been enlightened, they maybe understand in their head, they've tasted, they've experienced, shared in the Holy Spirit, and they've tasted the goodness of the Word of God and the powers of the age to come, but then they've fallen away. It's it's like the belief, but there's some action to it. It's like life change. Maybe this is just speaking to hey, they were made aware of all this stuff, but they never really applied it. Never really
it's devotion, commitment.
Yeah, they never. So they were able to fall away because they never really took those steps of obedience.
It's the parable of the sower with the seeds.
Yeah,
they saw it. They were, this is great. Yeah. Jesus is wonderful. This is amazing. But no, I don't really need it.
Yeah,
so I'm not completely off, but
no, you're not.
No.
The beginning of this chapter starts, therefore let us leave the elementary doctrine of Christ and go on to maturity, not laying again a foundation of repentance from dead works and of faith toward God. It's not that we move past the gospel and the need for forgiveness. It's that we move from that into maturity. And it seems as though what's being described are people who never moved into maturity.
Yeah.
There's like, oh, Jesus, free
Yeah.
forgiveness, great. And
Yeah.
there's no life change. And then, so they have some enlightenment, but fall away, and they come back. It's like they're crucifying Christ all over again.
Yeah.
And he's in this next section with Abraham, because that might seem random, he's really talking about, he gave this promise to Abraham, and then Abraham had after that 25 years and a lot of suffering, and had to have this obedience even unto go sacrifice your son. And then after that, he repeated his promise to Abraham, which is for all of us. It is all connected to, you have to have faith and commitment to God's promises.
Yeah, and then I appreciate in 9 through 12, there's some, it feels like hopeful promises that like,
Oh, yes.
hey, for God is not unjust so as to overlook your work and the love that you've shown in my name and the serving of saints, blah, blah. So, I mean, this is him specifically talking to this group of people, but he's encouraging them to show the same earnestness to have the full assurance of hope until the end. It says, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. So again, it's just an encouragement.
Faith and patience, I think, is sort of the theme of this whole section. That's what Jesus showed us in the garden, faith and patience. And that's what Abraham showed back at the beginning of the whole story. And that's what we still have to have in our faith, is in our walk, is faith, just complete faith in God's promises, and patience in suffering, patience in what we know our hope is.
Yeah, and then he goes right into the section on the promises. He talks about Abraham. And
Yep.
There's some more hope language here at the end. So, which is good. Hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain. Some priestly language there, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever, which introduces us to this next section that Lance is so eager to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I am excited to talk about it because, first of all, when you're reading this for the first time and you try to pronounce Melchizedek, you don't know.
Is that even how you say it?
Yeah, Melchizedek.
Oh, I thought you were like making fun of me for how I
No, not at all. Like if you're
Sorry.
if you're just like reading this, say, what? Who is this guy? And the who is this guy is exactly the question you should ask, because when he shows up first in the Bible in Genesis 14, you're like, who is this guy? And it's never explained who Melchizedek was.
And that was the only time in
Genesis chapter 14, and then he's
he's
referenced in
referenced.
Psalm 110, and then here, and that's it. And you don't get. It even says here in Hebrews, there's no lineage, there's no connection to anything else. He just shows up. So
He's another promise.
yeah.
Yeah,
Another type, another promise.
Which I thought was interesting. So this guy was a king and he was a priest. He was without a father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God. He continues a priest forever. So this guy is also a priest that's forever existing. I mean,
Well, we don't know his genealogy, which was really important to them. And that's really his point here. He didn't have a genealogy. Like, he's not part of the priesthood of Israel. And so he's separate, he's new. And it was a promise in Psalm 110.
This is even before Israel.
so did they have priests
Yeah.
that were outside? I thought it was only from the one house, like the line, Aaron,
Yeah.
that
Right.
line. These are going to be the priests. This is a guy who's like, no, you're recognized as a priest, but from a different line.
This is even before all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
This is before Moses ever lived in
Oh,
Egypt
okay.
and the Exodus. This is
This is Genesis.
this is Genesis 14. This is Abraham. So in Genesis chapter 12, God calls Abram
Okay.
and says, I want you to go to this new place and start this new thing, and through your family, all people of the earth will be blessed. And there's this deep promise. And he takes his nephew with him, who is Lot. Lot goes and settles in a valley, and that's where Sodom and Gomorrah are. You keep reading, they're later destroyed. But in this story, in Genesis 14, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah partner up with some other kings, and they go to battle. So it's like, I think 4 kings against 5 or 5 against 6. I don't remember the exact count. But Lot, Abram's nephew, is captured and taken prisoner. And so Abram gets his army. He's got 300 or so. I forget exactly how many people. But they go on a raid and they rescue Lot, kill a bunch of people, take the spoils, and then all of a sudden in Genesis 14, this guy Melchizedek shows up. So you're in 14, verse 18. So it just talks about this whole narrative of this back and forth battle. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. Now it doesn't say Yahweh, like the Lord, all capital Lord, but it is God Most High. So right there, you're reading the story and you're like, wait a minute, who is this? Who is Melchizedek? How could he be a priest? Well, God's got something going on with this guy. And he blessed Abram and said, blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. And that's it. That's the whole interaction. And then it goes back into the story, like interaction with the king of Sodom and Abram, and the way they divide everything up after that.
Yeah, that's so random. Like I always go back to like when we were reading in Luke, and like Jesus is there after he's come back, and he's like revealing himself in the Old Testament to like all his disciples, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you guys remember that Melchizedek?" They're like, "No, I don't remember that."
Yeah.
Like, the guy who's only mentioned one time is this ransom. Like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And
really,
he's like, "Yeah,
I love that. That's like whenever Jesus said, "Hey," like he opened up the scriptures and he showed them how everything was leading to him. That's really what Hebrews is doing for us. Like, hey, let me show you how everything was really leading to Jesus. Because Melchizedek means king of righteousness. Salem is actually another word for Jerusalem, which is the place of peace. So he's the king of righteousness. He's the king of peace. He's also a high priest. So he's giving us a lot in showing us he's another one who's eternal like this.
So we keep saying he was a king and a priest, but I mean we should stop right there and acknowledge that doesn't exist in other places in the Bible. So you have
was David not kind of like priestly?
So David was the king, and he did some priestly functions, but he was not the priest
of that line.
So you have the king before David, King Saul, who tried to function as the priest by offering a sacrifice, and that was not his role. And his disobedience in doing that, God pronounced judgment and said, "You will die. You'll no longer be the king. I have chosen someone else." So you have the three offices of the Old Testament: the prophet, the priest, and the king. What Hebrews is doing is saying that Jesus is all three.
Yeah.
He somehow in who he is all the things that the Old Testament has promised. All those offices, all those functions find themselves complete in Jesus.
Yeah.
In a better way. It is.
So this then it goes on to talk about this idea of this. Jesus is a better covenant, right? In here in Hebrews. I'm just moving us along.
Yeah.
That's good. I guess.
Oh gosh. Like while we're sitting here, it just occurred to me in all this, like because we know he's the great high priest. We know he made his once for all sacrifice, which we're getting into. And it says that because of what he's done, it's going to go on to, or it said last week when we read that we can, with confidence, enter the throne of grace. It's because he's the king too. It's his throne.
Yeah.
So the high priest can only go into this place once a year through the blood of bulls and goats, and we can talk about all that. But like Jesus went to the throne room not just because he was the sacrifice, but it's his throne room.
Yeah.
Oh my! I have some thinking to do about that.
All of them. Well, and I even think just shorthand, like who cares about a priest? Because I do think we've talked about it during this podcast series. But what is that? And I think the simplest way to think about it is a priest is a bridge between God and people. So he offers sacrifices so that we can enter into the holy presence of God. And he also cries out to God for the people. So he's a mediator, he's a bridge in between people and God.
Yeah. Which is, we just did that series of the kind of all access, talking about the priesthood of all, the doctrine of priesthood of all believers, and this this new covenant that Jesus is. It's a covenant that makes us all have access
because we
Jesus.
Participate.
Yeah.
In everything that Jesus is.
Yeah. It's one big circle that all equals itself. What? I don't know. This is confusing. He's a priest. I'm a priest. You're a priest. Wait, what?
That's right. He is the high priest, and so we become a priesthood of believers. Yes. So we mediate we have access to God in Jesus, and we mediate God's presence to the world in Jesus. It's all in Jesus, but we imitate who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't, I mean, I just was, again, this is in 7:22 through 25. I guess I end up underlining way more than that, but man, those are just, it's like such strong declarative, clear, like he's reminding these people, maybe they were all junked up about priests or something, or maybe it they were falling away from like,
They were
their beliefs
going
into
backwards.
yeah. But
He's
yeah.
he's the new covenant, and the better covenant, because the old covenant, that was the priesthood. That
Yeah.
was, I mean, it was the sacrifices, it was the priesthood, it was the temple, and he's reminding them that was all leading to something better and greater, that everything is found in Jesus. I think 22 through the end of, through 28, that's a great place to sort of sit. It's a good summary
Yeah.
of what the author's trying to tell us.
And the priesthood at its best, when it's functioning as it should, in all righteousness and purity, like even still, the high priest, when he's going to go on the Day of Atonement into this inner place, he has to make 3 different sacrifices.
Yeah.
And take a bath between each one and change his clothes.
Yep.
Because of just all the ritual purity that's required and what it takes to go before the presence of God. And this has that in mind, and saying like, Jesus just once for all was the sacrifice, was the priest, walked in and sat on the throne because he's also the king.
Yeah.
Big claims.
Yeah. Well, it especially for these people and the system of how, like the order of like how they worship, how they participate, and how they understood. I mean, it's radically different, but he clearly explains it there. It's like, dude, these guys were appointed by men. Therefore, they have to atone for their own junk before they can even offer a sacrifice for you. But look, this is made away. The word of oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. So it's like he doesn't even have to, it's already been done.
And so we can go.
Yeah.
We can go to God. I mean, it really is. It's unbelievable. I mean, for us, of course we can go. We can pray. I don't even feel like praying today. But for them, the fact that they could go into the presence of God just themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, that was world changing to them, right? It's a whole completely different worldview, which is why he keeps saying you can, because of who Jesus is and what he's done. And it's worth understanding, and, should lead us to humility and joy.
And it continues to talk about who Jesus was. He is one who has been tempted in every way. He is one who suffered. And so he is like us. So when we go to him, he knows what it means to be us and to experience what we have. And so it's not just that we go before an intimidating throne. Chapter 5, with confidence we go before this throne of grace, because he is sympathetic to us and he wants to pour out his grace.
And he says all of that right before he says, in suffering, Jesus really was perfected in obedience. And I actually kept thinking about Lance this week, because, just the reality of the fact that we are going to face suffering and learn how to still be committed to Jesus in the midst of that.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen to all of us. And just looking at Jesus, and then even the Abraham story, that's where we really know if we completely trust in him. Can we completely trust in whom we can because of who Jesus is?
Yeah.
I appreciated in 8 where it's like kind of boils it down. It's like, look, listen here. All I'm trying to say is we have such a high priest, Christ. The covenant he mediates is better, since it enacted better promises. Now that's me like taking a lot out of there, like a couple things. But ultimately, that's what it distills out as. It's better.
It's new and better.
It's better. Better promises. This is better. It's like
it's connected.
Yeah.
Right. So the Old Testament was all leading to the New Testament. The Old Testament was good. This is better.
Yeah.
Testament means covenant. This is a new and better.
Better promises. Better covenant.
Better high priest.
Yeah.
It's commercial, Ted.
Better access.
Yeah, that's why I think it's like he's like, listen, like let me just narrow. I know we've said all this stuff, but just listen. This is the last sales pitch. If nothing else you get from this, it's just better. Like, trust me, it's a better promise. It's better, right? You want the yes. Sold.
Yeah, and knowing that the old covenant was this amazing, good gift. Like even in that story of Abraham, he said, Abraham, I'm going to be your God, and you're going to be my people, and you're going to bless all nations. Whoever you bless, I'll bless, right? You are going to mediate my blessing to the whole world.
And this
That's
is
an
better.
amazing covenant.
Yeah.
And this is better.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to 9, where we get into some of I think, the redemption through the blood of Christ. I mean, there's some stuff in there. I mean, this is really, I guess, explaining unpacking a little bit of what we've talked about a little bit more. I don't know. Again, it's more the new covenant. It's referencing the whole, like, how the things happened, like the procedural things of the old covenant, right?
Yep. Moses built this tent. It had
Yeah.
all of these things that went with it, and an altar, and
Yeah.
everything that went with it, and then the tablets of stone themselves. Everything was. It's almost as if the covenant was ratified by the blood of bulls and goats. Like the sprinkling of the blood seals this covenant, and this chapter 9 is saying that, like, Jesus is now ratifying this new way, all of this with his own blood.
Yep. Which isn't this too where it talked about the hyssop and the stuff, the things that I know we've talked about before.
Yeah, it's just referencing back again in the tabernacle and temple. Hyssop was this branch that almost was feathery in a sense, and you could dip it in a bowl of blood, and that's what they would sprinkle with. Or like in the Exodus story, hyssop was used to spread the blood on the doorpost.
Yeah. And wasn't like there's hyssop again in the
At the crucifixion.
Yeah.
It says that a sponge with sour wine on it was attached to a hyssop branch and held up to Jesus.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, even the tabernacle, he says Moses built a tabernacle, and Jesus, it's all of creation. The tabernacle was where the presence of God was, that Moses built so that God could be with his people. But Jesus, right, it's a greater tabernacle. Presence of God is in him and everywhere.
Yeah.
When you think about all the references from last week's reading,
I know.
the Old Testament, and like the way he calls Jesus a son, as if from the reading of Solomon, Psalm 8, Psalm 22, like all the places, it's like, right here while we're sitting here, I'm having it's such an overwhelming, I don't even know how to describe, like, mind explosion that I'm going to have to think on this for a long time. But this is good.
Well, I mean, so far, I guess, like, summarizing Hebrews up to this point, really, as well, it's making a case. I feel like it's built to this, that it is about the priest, Jesus, the great high priest,
The great
king,
tabernacle,
priest, the great tabernacle,
the king.
It's a better of all these old stories.
The creator,
it's a
the son.
of
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
of what we've been not just talking and learning about, but the Old Testament of the big story. So, that was it. Then we had the Psalm this week. I don't know. You guys want to look at that? I had a quick
That was a
thing.
good one.
We may not want to.
What psalm was it?
135.
135.
Which I guess I didn't put my thing in there.
Don't go to
135.
Job.
Yeah, don't go to Job. Yeah. I was telling somebody about that, and they're like, that is funny.
I laughed all day.
Yeah.
It was the best.
Rachel said after we were talking, she's like, we should have had Ted read it.
Yeah. That would have been hilarious.
And we're like, what?
Let's
Yeah.
read this psalm out
Well,
loud.
and then when you said afterwards that I bet so many people, like in small group, have all experienced that they
That's-
think
yeah.
they're there. And they're not.
Absolutely.
You're like,
Yes.
wait, what
What are we
translation
what are we talking
reading
about?
from?
This is the worst.
I think for me, and this is a weird thing, and I maybe we can spend just a second talking about it, because when we get to 5, that's a weird pause. I'm like, I don't know if I want to bring this up. But in verse 5, it says, "For I know that the Lord is great, and that our Lord is above all the gods." And so here we see, like, maybe explain for people the capital, the all caps Lord, and then just like a capital Lord. What the difference there is?
Yeah.
Lord, all caps, is Yahweh.
Is the name, Yahweh.
And then Lord, just capital Lord, is
It's like saying God.
God.
Yeah. Elohim, right?
Yeah.
That's that word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, it just you know, I don't know why when I read it this time, you know, a long time ago, we in the kitchen at the office start talking about all the other gods, and that God is over all the other gods, and just here seeing it there, I don't know why it stood out to me.
No,
That
that's good. I
time
think
is
that's helpful.
something.
I think a lot of people have questions about that. What are there other gods? What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, there are, and Yahweh is the Lord over all of them, according to what that says. Unless I'm not reading it right. Do
That's
they
what it says,
translate
yeah.
that?
No.
Okay. So
Yahweh's
But we're not polytheistic, right? There's
Correct.
one God, right? How we think of God. There's one creator God who is above all and eternal, but there are, you know, all sorts of things we worship,
Yeah.
and there is a spiritual reality.
Yeah.
And that's what it's talking about. I think those two things.
Yeah. The heavenly host, you could read it that way.
yeah.
But also, I mean, this is a culture in many ways similar to ours, but they name their idols. They name they name their gods. We don't.
Yeah.
And so this is also a way of saying, like, Yahweh is the Lord of everything. Everything that you worship, whatever it may be, he's the Lord of that.
Well, and just speaking to that, where I was sort of sitting was in 15 through 18 when he's talking about the idols of the nations, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's what he's
Those are the
referring to.
gods.
Those
Yeah.
are the gods. That's the
Yep.
lower G God.
Yep.
And he says, you know, all the nations, which is the whole world, right? All of us make idols. They have eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear. There's no breath, right? They're not real. They're not living. They're not the living God, which we keep hearing about. And then 18, he says, those who make them become like them. So do all those who trust in them. And that is heavy. I mean, I was trying to sort of sit in that. We do all have idols. We are tempted to have idols all the time. And the truth is that whatever we worship, we become like.
Yeah.
Whatever we trust in, that's what we follow. You know, that's what we submit to, whatever we're trusting. And I mean, think about the difference between 18 and what we're reading in Hebrews. The complete trust and commitment that Jesus and Abraham had to God. And then what do we trust in? That's what we become.
All right. Well, that's a good word. I know. Maybe anything else you guys want to say as we wrap up? We still got a little bit left in Hebrews.
Yep.
So
Chapter
I
10.
don't know what else is there something big that's going to happen in 10, 11?
No, I mean,
How
it's
far
just
does it go?
13 chapters in Hebrews.
Okay, good.
But chapter 10 it's so good.
Yeah. That's why it stood on its own on the bookmark.
that's
All right.
it.
So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to next week's podcast then, where we're
Okay.
going to explore 10. Well,
No, I mean, when we read through the New Testament, or when we read through the Bible as a small group, I love getting to Hebrews chapter 10 because I just use it to ask questions. Like, what do you think this means after having read all through the Old Testament and all this?
oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, we should
It'll
do
be
that.
good. Yeah.
All right. So that's a teaser. Tune in next week.